We have seen lots of change in adoption in general, but specifically as it relates to transracial adoption. I mean, there was concretely a time in the history of adoption, in the not so distant history of adoption, where the message was treat your child the way you would treat any child, and it's all going to be okay. There was a lot of color blindness and, all those things that we now know to be super damaging and not helpful and not supportive. And we have now definitely moved to a space where we put a lot of emphasis on intentionality behind making the decision to do transracial adoption, and also assessment and understanding of what it's going to mean for your life moving forward, and the
Right.
decisions that you have to make, the decisions and the sacrifices that you have to make in order to prioritize the needs of your child. There are going to be spaces and places that you as a Caucasian family would feel very comfortable in that you will no longer be able to go to, activities you will no
Mm.
longer be able to engage in the same way with your child from a community of color, because your child will not be welcomed in the same way or will not feel the same way. And it's really important that people understand that there is sacrifice associated with that. There's loss of privilege associated with that. So our job is to make sure that people have really that they're aware and that they've thought through things that honestly many of us live life not ever having to think through if we're not considering transracial adoption.
The love and gratitude that my family had for me growing up was fantastic. I can't speak enough to that. But at the same time, I don't think there were those questions of
Okay.
what do you think it's going to be like raising a black child or a child of color. I think there's a lot to say for the conversations nowadays that are happening in terms of, are you ready? Are you prepared? What are you thinking about? How are you going to expose your child to certain things, and what are your main concerns? Because the love aspect of it, yes, I think that's number one. Love your child. You have to love your child if you want to find any kind of success. But if you're adopting a child of color, like there's a lot more baggage that comes along with it. Um, and those questions weren't asked back then. You
So you
know,
say, would you say, like, I hear you saying love is huge. Are you saying love is not enough?
yeah, no, I would definitely say love is the base, and that's
Hmm.
where it has to start. But there's a lot more that goes into it, and there's a lot more education that I think if you're a white parent adopting a child of color that needs to go into it. A lot more thought.
All right. Good evening and welcome. We'll give some more time for a few more people to join. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. Hope everybody is having a nice evening. This is kind of where I usually like to sit, and you can see if you're joining us that there's a Christmas tree in the background that my kids are excited to put up. As the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I will add that although in our household we celebrate Christmas, all religions, all celebrations, all holiday spiritual celebrations are important. And welcome. Okay. All right. I don't want to hold us too long, and I can see that some people are still coming. So as they come, we will go ahead and get started. So Welcome to an evening with Siena. You will see there's a microphone here. It's a little bit off to the side. So if you see me leaning over, that's why. Welcome to an evening with Siena. Thank you so much for joining us on this fine and cold Tuesday evening. Welcome to Transracial Adoption, a conversation about parenthood and family when love, race, and identity intersect. I am Samantha Fletcher. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the Siena School. We are a school that serves students in grades 3 through 12 with dyslexia and language-based learning differences. If you're looking for such a school for your child, look no further. We are your choice. We have campuses in Silver Spring and in Northern Virginia. I'm also the host and producer of the Daily Border Crossings podcast. Daily Border Crossings is a show about othering where I feature guests and topics that are sometimes othered. They're not always prominently discussed. You can find Daily Border Crossings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So on the podcast and at Siena, we have an emphasis on the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and all that means in terms of identity and culture, and in terms of striving for a sense of belonging. While dyslexia and language-based learning are the mission and focus of Siena, we recognize that people really take their identities with them wherever they go. And as such, our DEIB department makes it a point to highlight and have conversations about various identities, as we've done with an evening with Siena for some time now. This evening, our conversation is on transracial adoption. The experiences and needs are not unlike other adoptive families in many ways, and also are unique in certain ways. Tonight, we will explore complexities via first-person lived experience and professional expertise. Our esteemed panelists will discuss the opportunities and challenges of raising and supporting children across racial and cultural lines, supporting parents, and offering insight for educators and community members seeking to foster inclusive and affirming environments. So we'll start by welcoming our panelists to the show. Beverly Clarke here, a former Siena parent, currently serves as the Senior Director of Clinical and Support Services at the Barker Adoption Foundation. In her role with Barker, Beverly is responsible for managing, developing, implementing, and providing oversight and quality assurance for the clinical aspects of the work provided by the agency's adoption and support programs. Beverly, welcome to the show. Is there anything I should add to that?
The only piece is that I am also an adoptive parent. So my
Awesome.
kids were adopted from Ethiopia as toddlers.
Okay. Thank you. Beverly's also an adoptive parent. And then our other panelist is Christopher Brown. He is the Dean of Equity and Belonging at Brewster Academy in New Hampshire. Prior to Brewster, Christopher worked as an academic support teacher, diversity coordinator, coach, and advisor, just some of the roles that he's held. He is a transracial adoptee, having been adopted by white parents, and he is going to share his story and impact the narrative on transracial adoption. Chris, welcome to the show. Is there anything else I can add to that?
No, nailed it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so Beverly, let me look at my notes. I wanted to start with you with a couple of questions, specifically from a data standpoint. So according to data from EBSCO and the Lifetime Adoption Agency, 40% of adoptions currently are transracial. That number is up from a 2017 to 2019 study by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that showed that about 28% of adoptions were transracial. I'm wondering if those numbers sound accurate, and what do you attribute to the increase?
I would say I don't know statistically what exactly the numbers are. They sound accurate to me. They could be accurate. But I don't know. I think that from my experience, we've really transitioned. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and the world looks very different now than it has looked. And I think we have gone through different spaces and different transitions as it relates to race relations in our communities and in the country. It looks different depending on where you are. And I've certainly seen an increase through time, over time, in the numbers of families and parents that are really just seeking to parent the kids that need a family. And that often then leads in the direction of transracial adoptions because the percentage of kids, I do a lot of older child adoptions as well. The
Okay.
percentage of kids, minority kids, can be overrepresented in foster care and in
Mm,
public foster care. And traditionally, we have many more Caucasian families, which makes sense when you think about the percentages just within the population, right? Of how many people it's majority population that are coming to us seeking adoption. So a lot of times the numbers of kids that are from communities of color are larger in the larger, more represented, as well as the parents that are white are more represented. So it should lead to an increase in transracial adoption.
okay. Thank you, Beverly. As you mentioned, you are as I mentioned, you're a former Siena parent. Your child went to Siena. Again, it's a school for students with dyslexia and learning-based differences and an LD school. You found that your child and your family were in the company of several other adoptive families. It is not specifically transracial adoptive families, but families of adoption in general. And I know you had written a piece where you cited that to be at about 20% in terms of adoptive families. What do you have thoughts or actually knowledge on that number, right? Like what let me switch the view here. The amount of families that was at adopted families at LD schools or at schools in general. What are you I remember you having some thoughts on that.
So I did. That was something that actually came as a surprise when we placed our child, when we chose to send our daughter to Siena. It
Hmm.
was a very pleasant surprise because she found herself within a community where there were other kids who had shared experiences that she could connect with. So that was actually it was not something I was expecting coming into it. Looking back at it, I mean, I think, again, I could probably speculate a little bit around. I don't know that there are concrete facts surrounding why that is, but I will
Hmm.
say that parents that come to parenting through adoption. There's a lot of education, there's a lot of training that's required on the front end, and we have found that our parents tend to be really proactive about seeking resources
Okay.
when their kids have needs. So it would track for me. It makes sense that kids that present that with learning differences or any other sort of specialized learning needs or needs in general,
Hmm.
that adoptive parents are very likely to seek resources, and Siena is one of the best local resources, in my opinion. So
Thank you.
I think that it would make sense that parents that are being proactive about seeking resources would find a school like Siena.
Okay. Awesome. So, can you tell us a little bit about the adoption process in terms of, families that might be on the call who are thinking about adopting? Just like what sort of things go into the adoption process in general, and then what additional steps are involved when the adoption process is transracial?
Yes. So generally, we get a range of parents. We have programs for basically all types of adoption. So at the agency that I work with, we do infant adoptions. We also do international adoptions, and then we have a significant emphasis on older child adoptions. We're replacing kids who are waiting in the foster care system, and those kids tend to be older. So they ages 10 and above are our target population for the kids that are in our older child program. We get some families that come to us knowing that they want to adopt. They may have experienced infertility, or they may have just been drawn to adoption as the way that they wanted to start their family for personal reasons, or they may be really motivated to want to parent kids that need a family, right?
Okay. Hmm.
Those families will sometimes seek out our agency. They'll attend a general information meeting, or they will meet with our outreach coordinator to learn about programs and learn about the options that are available to them. And then we have families who hear about us based on the need of a specific child. So we might be out doing child-specific recruitment for a waiting sibling group or a waiting
Okay.
older child, or we often run ads because we have way more kids that are waiting and in need of families than we do families that are waiting. So we do a
Mm,
lot of outreach and proactive recruitment. So we may have families that come to us that have never actually thought about adoption before, but they heard about the need and they come to us to learn, well, what would the process look like? What might be involved in adopting a child? Once they come to us, then generally families go through after doing the initial like the initial information meetings and those things. If they're interested in learning more, then they go through pre-adoption training, and our pre-adoption training is really comprehensive and it prepares you for all the different types of adoption so that
okay.
parents can really assess their resources, assess the type of child that they feel best prepared to parent, learn more about some of the circumstances, learn more about some of the resources that will be needed. It's a pretty comprehensive training. And then from there, parents generally move forward to decide if they would like to apply and decide which program they want to apply to. Once you've applied to the program, then you get assessed to see if you meet the initial criteria. Different countries have different criteria,
Mm,
different programs. There's different requirements around age and health and all of those kinds of things. And if you're approved, then you move forward to the home study process. And during the home study, a social worker comes into your home just to get to know you, to see the physical space, but also to get to know your family. They talk to references, they talk to family members, they talk to kids, if you have kids in the home, to really help you decide if this is an appropriate path for you to grow your family.
okay.
And in addition to that, for the agency and for the social worker to assess, do you have the skills that are needed to parent a child that is going to be placed through adoption into your family?
Mm.
And if you're approved, then you move forward to the waiting process, and the waiting process looks different depending on
This
which
is
program that you're in.
this is an
Um,
extensive process.
it's a process. The
Yeah.
timeline can look different for how long you're going to be waiting, depending on which program that you're in. And then once placed with a child, you transition into post-placement, where we do continue to do visits and offer support for a period of time before you finalize your adoption. And during that time, we're also helping families identify resources, figure out what they need to do, what are the things that their kids need for support. So this is where it kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier, that our families are really trained and the whole process is really geared towards encouraging people to seek resources proactively, which is where you'll have a lot of people that would then find schools like Siena. So that's the short version of the process.
That's the short version.
That's the
Okay.
short version.
So, and then when we're talking about transracial pieces, when we're talking about differences that way, were there extra
There are specific
steps?
trainings. There are specific trainings that we have our families take if they let us know that they are interested in being considered for transracial adoption.
Okay.
And it really is, a lot of it is designed. We have a class that's called Considerations in Transracial Adoption. It's really designed to have people take a step back and to think through what it would be like and what the realities are and what the responsibilities are of raising a child that is of a different race than your own. And through that class, some people walk away from the class with no judgment, deciding that it's not the right fit for them. And other
Hmm.
people walk away understanding that there's going to be a lot of work involved in order to do it well, but they feel committed and ready, and they feel like their community is the right community to be able to bring a child into that is of a different race than their own. So there is additional training, and
Yeah.
then it is significantly assessed during the home study process to determine if your perception of readiness matches our perception of your readiness, based on the experience that we have working with families, and just to really help people think things through. We've worked with enough families that we can help provide context and hopefully help people come to the right decision around if it's the right fit for their family, which sometimes it's not, and that's perfectly okay.
Right, right. Beverly, would you say that has changed over the years, like the training in this class that you're talking about? I wonder
Yes.
because that something that even wasn't even around a long time ago, and even
Yes.
since it's come around, I imagine that it's changed.
Yes, absolutely. We have families. We've been around for a long time. Our agency is 80 years old.
Oh,
And through that time, we have seen lots of change in adoption in general, but specifically as it relates to transracial adoption. I mean, there was concretely a time in the history of adoption, in the not so distant history of adoption, where the message was love is enough. Treat your child the way you would treat any child, and it's all going to be okay. There was a lot of color blindness and, all those things that we now know to be super damaging and not helpful and not supportive. But there certainly was a time where that was the messaging, and we have now definitely moved to a space where we put a lot of emphasis on intentionality behind making the decision to do transracial adoption, and also it like assessment and understanding of what it's going to mean for your life moving forward, and the
Right.
decisions that you have to make, the decisions and the sacrifices that you have to make in order to prioritize the needs of your child. There are going to be spaces and places that you, as a Caucasian family, would feel very comfortable in that you will no longer be able to go to. Activities you will
Mm,
no longer be able to engage in the same way with your child from a community of color, because your child will not be welcomed in the same way or will not feel the same way. And it's really important that people understand that there is sacrifice associated with that. There's loss of privilege associated with that. And there's some big decisions that people have to make. So our job is to make sure that people have really, that they're aware and that they've thought through things that honestly, many of us live life not ever having to think through if we're not considering transracial adoption,
right.
so that they can make informed decisions before they move forward into transracial adoption. Because as I tell people every day, we have over 100,000 kids in the
Mm,
foster care system that are legally free and in need of parents. And if transracial adoption is not the right fit for you, we're going to be able to find a kid that is the right fit for you, that is of your same race.
okay.
So there's no shame or harm in deciding that this is not the
Yeah.
right fit for you, right?
Right. You touched on two a lot of things, right? The two one stood out and then another one stood out and then so many, but two that I'll say that I'll highlight the colorblind piece. That was such a that was a whole thing once upon a time, right? Like that was a movement, and it sounds good and kind and polite, and you want to sort of not acknowledge it in some polite way. But then we learned that the damaging aspects of that. So I'm glad you kind of just touched on that. That a lot of people learn. I think some people are still learning that using the colorblind way is not the helpful long-term healthy way to go. But the other piece that you just said, having parents think about places you may have gone, you think about you may not be able to continue to go because your child won't feel good. I think that was huge to touch on that. That was just like that really stood out for me. I'll share with our guests again, welcome and thank you for being with us. With our transracial adoption, a conversation about parenthood and family when love, race, and identity intersect. Evening discussion, and I'll share with our guests that the three of us and maybe more people have all listened to the NPR episode. It was NPR's show 1A, and a couple years back, they had an episode, The Journey of Transracial Adoption. And there's things on there that touch on color blindness. And what you said, there was something that was said in there where it was a white daughter and a white mom and a daughter who's in her 20s now. And she mentioned having a therapist that the mother loved, right? And but the daughter ended up being like, this therapist isn't working for me. And the mother thought, but she's so great. So that's why, again, that made me think about like thinking about places you might not be able to go. It might feel good for you, but will it feel welcoming for your child? There's something to think about. So I will come back to you, especially since you also did adopt, and you said yours is more like trans international, um,
We're transcultural. Our kids are from
transcultural, right?
Ethiopia,
There's a
but my
trans.
whole family we're all from different places. So yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to let Chris get in here. Chris, thank you for again,
Yes.
thanks you both for being with us. Chris, I wanted to, I imagine that your parents went through a lot of the adoption process that Beverly was just describing. Um, can you talk about, I don't know if you can talk about anything you know about the process, um, and then talk to us some things about growing up.
Absolutely. So in terms of the actual process for I don't know all the details,
Okay, okay,
but 3 to 5 days old, somewhere within a week being adopted. But the process leading up, I would say, hearing stories growing up, it did not sound as extensive, nearly as extensive as what Beverly's doing now.
okay,
Um, I'm not going to say it was easy. I don't think it was. I think there was a waiting period, but I don't think there was as long of a waiting period. I don't
okay,
think there was as many questions, forms, things you had to fill out, um, which kind of goes to speak the time and care that Beverly, you and your work is taking into consideration here, which is fantastic. Um, but that said, I know my family, my mother in particular, she had a goal of adopting a child. That's one of the things that she wanted to do.
okay.
And that she followed through with it. When she has a goal, she follows through with it. And I know that she might say that, oh, it didn't matter what child, I just wanted to adopt and I wanted to help in that way. I know she wanted a child of color. I know my mother very, very well.
You know she
She
wanted a child of color.
she
Okay.
definitely wanted a child of color.
And you said she was doing a lot of work, like in helping, right? With your
Yes.
mom in terms of tell me about some of the work she was doing and
I mean, she used to work in hospitals. She is a therapist now.
okay.
I believe like she's kind of closed off in that way. She won't tell you the exact details, but on her way to retirement, if not fully retired right now.
Okay.
But she won Woman of the Year in an aspect and
Wow.
works with people for the people.
Okay.
She wants to, in a lot of ways, like and my sister as well, save the world.
Very, I
I
remember you saying that, right? Very much a save the world kind of person.
and I wouldn't say it's that white savior complex. It's she wants to help people. And I think I brought it up. She's a fantastic therapist, which is why she's at where she's at, won
Okay.
awards that she's won. And she's one that will not charge as much as other therapists are going to charge because she
Wow.
knows her clientele might not be able to afford it. So she is going to lower that rate, unlike others that are going to, always charge. She wants to help the people.
Okay.
Um, so I'll start with that. And the love and gratitude that my family had for me growing up was fantastic. I can't speak enough to that. But at the same time, I don't think there were those questions of
Okay.
what do you think it's going to be like raising a black child or a child of color in general.
Got it.
Um, my sister is she's biological to my parents. Um, so they already had 4 years, 4 or 5 years of experience raising a child. Um, so that might have made it easier to get into the adoption process. But
Okay.
I think there's a lot to say for the conversations nowadays that are happening in terms of, are you ready? Are you prepared? What are you thinking about? How are you going to expose your child to certain things, and what are your main concerns? Because the love aspect of it, yes, I think that's number one. Love your child. You have to love your child if you want to find any kind of success. But if you're adopting a child of color, like there's a lot more baggage that comes along with it. Um, and those questions weren't asked back then, you
So you
know?
say, would you say, like, I hear you saying love is huge. Are you saying love is not enough?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say love is the base, and that's
Hmm.
where, it has to start, but there's a lot more that goes into it, and there's a lot more education that I think if you're a white parent adopting a child of color that needs to go into it, a lot more thought.
Okay.
Um, and again, I want to reiterate, growing up, I had the most supportive parents, at times to a fault, even, the
So,
love was there.
okay. All right. I want to talk about that a little bit. Can you, when did you sort of learn that you were adopted? Do you even remember?
I know the exact time,
Okay.
exact location, and exact situation.
would you share that story?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'll start off by saying was something that probably 10 years ago, maybe, that I started really talking about more with my parents and my mother, and in particular, and it's one that she will voice. I was terrified because I knew it was going to happen. I knew I was going to have this conversation, and
Hmm.
you can try to prepare in whatever ways, but some things you can't fully prepare for.
Okay, wait,
Um,
pause. Were you the youngest? Tell me the sibling situation.
yes, I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest out of the family.
And then how
Um,
many siblings did you have?
oh boy, so I have my sister, the sister that's closest in age to me, Molly.
Okay.
She's the biological from my parents.
Okay.
And then my father was married before, and he
Okay.
had
Okay.
he had two kids, and which we're all very, very close. Actually, a
Okay.
couple of them on here today.
Oh,
And so there is a significant 20-year age gap, 22-year
okay.
age gap between those two. But then the sister I mainly grew up with, if you will, like
Yeah.
in the household, there's a 4-year age
Okay.
difference.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to your story. Sorry.
So no worries. I was at my neighbor's house, two houses down from ours, living in little Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, of 2,500 people. And I was over there. My mother was obviously close by because I ran up to her, but my friends asked me, my neighbors, the friends that, hey, I was 6 years old, by the way, 6.
Okay.
Why are you black and your parents are white? And I remember specifically being like, oh, damn, hang on a second, let me go find out. And so I run up to my mother and I asked, why am I black and you're white? And this is where my mother was like, here it is. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am going to have to tell him. And then what? What happens after that?
Mm.
And she says, well, Chris, you're adopted. And I look at her. Oh, okay. Boom. Right back to my friends. I'm adopted. All right, let's go keep playing tag. Uh,
Okay.
and that was that. My mother sitting there. What? Huh? It?
She's like,
That's
I
it?
was waiting and get scared, and that's it.
And
Because
yeah,
kids are that way.
right. And I think where the love aspect comes in is she then, like I said, 10 years ago, that conversation's kind of started to evolve more and more. I started to ask more questions and kind of find out she, as a baby, as a newborn, 3, 5 days old from the start, um, would let me know you're adopted, but you're our child and we love you. And
Nice.
that is something that she told me, apparently, throughout my whole time as a baby, before I can remember. So when she ended up revealing you're adopted, do I remember all that she said? No, but I think that does speak volumes of how much that does sit into a child, does sit into a baby. Like there is things that are taken in because I knew what adoption was in a
Mm.
way. Didn't
Okay.
fully grasp it,
Yeah.
but I knew I was not birthed from this woman.
Okay.
I
Do
was
you
birthed from
know?
a baby.
I imagine it's hard to know the answer to what I'm about to ask, but because I mean, you were 6, it's a long time ago. Do you know if you had ever sort of noticed physical differences before that neighbor asked that question?
Yeah, I would say I I can't say that I have never not noticed some sort of difference ever since I can remember.
Okay.
Um, and that's why I think that's why that base of yeah, you love your child, you show this child support is so important. Like because of that love, I
Yeah.
I knew there was a difference, but I knew it wasn't a bad thing, and I knew
Okay.
I was supported. I knew I
Okay.
had love there. I knew I had a place to go back to that is going to be grounding me and solid. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Was race discussed? Was race discussed growing up?
Uh, not really.
Okay.
Um, Not until everybody was old enough to have uh, real arguments at the dinner table.
Mm.
Now, I will say no, it wasn't brought up. There were plenty of times my sister and my dad, they loved going at it. Not in a bad way, but they were always debating
Yeah.
something at the dinner table. And this is back even when she was what, 10, 11, she claimed she was an atheist and all that. So she knew what she wanted at a very young age.
Okay.
And she had ideas at a very young age. But they would go out of the table to the point where I'm like, all right, well, I don't care about this. I want to go watch some TV. I'm
Right.
done with my meal. Can I please leave?
Yeah.
Um, but so there could have been sprinkles of it in there, but
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of talk of race. There wasn't a
Okay.
lot of talk of race. Was there a lot of talk of acceptance? Was there a lot of talk of how to treat other people
Yeah.
um, with dignity and respect? Absolutely, that went across the board. Didn't matter
Okay.
who the person was. I think that's one of the reasons both my sister and I growing up, once we got into those social circles, high school, things like that,
Yeah.
and college, we really were always the ones that would bring in the outsiders. I think I
Mm.
can confidently say my sister, she was very popular in school. I was an athlete, so she was an athlete. We were popular in school, so like, but we also we had to deal with that. Why are you inviting so and so? Why not?
Okay.
Okay, they're
Well,
weird. They're weird. Let's learn about their weirdness.
exactly. I've been telling my students instead of weird, how about it's different from what you're used to, but get to know something about it.
Yeah.
But glad you mentioned school because that's gonna be my next question. Can you talk about schooling?
Mhm.
What was schooling like for you in terms of
In
just
terms
like
of race or
being,
in terms of my ability?
I think in terms of race and just being transracially adopted, like how did I don't know, I want teachers to have some takeaways and think
Yeah.
about what things they should be thinking about.
Um, so being somebody that's got some neurodivergence, got some ADD there, maybe a little dyslexia and been diagnosed and things like that. Um, that comes with a lot of baggage, right?
Hmm.
And when it comes to learning, when it comes to what you're focusing on in the classroom.
Okay.
So growing up, I would say the being the one black person
There
in
we go.
preschool, in kindergarten, all through
Yeah.
uh, elementary school until I went to private school. I went to Eagle Brook School, um, junior boarding school, Western Massachusetts. So kids from all around the world. That was really my first seventh grade was that first realization step into the world of diversity. Yes, I had other experiences, but this was boom. It's a boarding school. You're
Yeah.
in middle school, you're there, you're bored, and you're exposed to all these different cultures. Um, Particularly, there were other black students there. Now, were there a lot of other black students? No, but the other black students there, I can confidently say they were all from the city.
Okay.
Um, and so definitely different from the sticks that I grew up in, the things that I
Mm-hmm.
learned. So learning how to tie a do-rag, that's where that happened. Learning
Mm.
how important hair was didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen until even more like I learned how important hair was back then. But at that
Right.
point, me at that point, it was I looked good with it too. Shave it off, we're good to go. No fade needed, no braids needed, whatever. Um, but even now I'm being more exposed to this is a serious thing. This is more of a
Right.
serious thing, more of a serious thing.
Yeah.
So I
That is
think
a Black
that
culture thing for sure.
yeah,
Hair, care, and the all the things involving hair that
yeah,
is particular to Black people.
yeah.
That's something to think about.
And I
Right?
do say, I look back at old photos of me being, a child between the ages of 2 and 10,
Uh-huh.
until I had some sort of then it became on to me, like when I could dress myself, like whatever I looked like, okay, that's my fault. Um, but I look back, I'm like, damn, what is going on with my hair? What, where's the lineup?
Right?
Sorry, mom.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. So my son's been letting his grow. So we on a whole thing on like hair care products and all of that because he's letting it grow. And he's like, what about getting the intro? But yeah, line up, depending on the region you're in, you might call it shape up, tape up, edge
Yep.
up, line up. But that's an important piece that everybody doesn't know if you're not in Black culture.
And none of that, like I would say that was all when it came to that kind of portion of Black culture,
Yeah.
that was not, I was not fully exposed to that until seventh grade. And that was six Black people in a school of 250.
Mm,
And so still very,
still,
very small, but
yeah.
because I was boarding, I was with these people all day
Right.
and every day.
Right.
So it wasn't just a one, oh, I'm here today and then I go home. So that was kind of throughout middle school, throughout high school, and then yeah, college. Those were the years that I learned about Black culture, really.
Okay.
And so that's where the base of love is fantastic, but there is way more about that you can support as a white adoptive parent that you can do to ensure your child's success. Now, I'm not saying any of this. I think for me
Hmm.
personally, and I've got friends that are adopted, friends that are translationally adopted, that it's not the same thing. I look at it as making me a stronger person and able to, in the end, deal with things in a better way. Um, at the same time, it took a lot of time and energy to navigate that and get to a
Mm,
point of, okay, here I am, confident, fine with things. Always had kind of some sort of confidence, but what did I have to do? What did I have to go through to get
right.
to that point?
Right, right.
With,
Um,
yeah,
okay, I'm gonna transition to Bev, but I'm gonna c come back to you. So be thinking about some pointers and tips, like similar, because hearing you talk about love as the base, there needs to be more. So what are some of those, recommendations and some of what is because it sounds like there was some loss and like what can that look like that people can be doing? I think you've named some of it, but I'll come back to get some more of that. And I think because you hit the nail on the head in terms of I think something that sometimes and just going by the fact that I've been doing DEI for at least a decade, and that has involved a fair share of anthropology and a lot of studying of just people and cultures. And some of the things that I find is sometimes people forget about the grown up piece that that child will be away from you at some point. And what does it mean, like for you, like when you said all the hard work and what happened later, what does it mean to be a black man in this world? You're going to have to find that out one day. I mean, now you are, but like as a kid, you don't think about it because this is your sweet little child that is protected, and in your home. But like at some point, this child will be, a fully grown person away from you. And then what is that? How are they going to figure that out? So I'm going to switch back to Beverly, to just talk a bit about your experience with transcultural adoption, because I know when you and I talked, you said some people might assume that they're your biological kids. Some people would like notice and be like, "Oh, I don't think those are biological." It's not that it has to be anybody's business, but can you share some of your stories with transcultural adoption?
Yes. Well, it's kind of interesting, right? It depends on what region you're in. We as a family that has adopted kids that are the same color as us but of a different culture, and like I said, our I'm from Trinidad, my husband's from Guyana, my kids are from Ethiopia, so we're a multicultural family. So that part kind of comes naturally to us. But um I talk with my parents that I work with all the time about because we work with families that also do adoption that is not transracial, about the some of the challenges or unique nature that comes when you're a family that's not a conspicuous family. We go out, if we're in Silver Spring, everybody knows that my kids are not my biological kids because Silver Spring has like one of the highest populations of Ethiopians, so people know what Ethiopians look like. They know I don't look Ethiopian, my kids are Ethiopian.
Okay.
So in these spaces where people are culturally aware, we'll get I've had Ethiopian people ask if my husband was Ethiopian. I've had them ask if the kids were adopted. Like people know. So you get used to being able to like answer those questions. But if we travel outside of the area and like venture into other parts of America, like a lot of times people just assume they're biological. So we
Yeah.
don't get faced with as many questions as families that do have kids that are visually of a different race very, clearly.
Right.
Um, so a lot of what we work with our families on, it's about kind of learning how to share information and learning
Oh,
how and when to share information. And I'm big on transparency and I'm big on role modeling while you have the opportunity to role model for your kids how to navigate the world.
okay.
So I really work a lot with my families on how do you casually answer questions, right? Like Chris's example of a friend runs up to you and says, why aren't you the same color as your parents or whatever? Like we work a lot with our families and with the kids. We have groups for adopted kids as well on just like learning how to answer questions, right? And like I remember one time I was in a grocery store and somebody asked me somebody asked me something about my girls and I said they were adopted and then they said something like, how much did you pay for them or something along those lines.
Mm,
And I remember thinking to myself, like, we're in the grocery store, like, how much am I actually going to engage with this person? And doing a quick analysis in my head of, is this a moment to educate people? Is this a moment to move it along? Is this a moment? And ultimately, it comes down to what's going to impact my kids the most, right? Like, what's going to
right.
impact them in the best possible way. So I think in a situation like that, I responded, I was like, oh, well, with adoption, you don't pay for kids, you pay for the process, and the cost varies depending on the country you adopt from, or something like that, right? And it was just one
Right.
of those, and I keep pushing my cart kind of thing. But I think that you sort of learn to pivot and to navigate the questions that come at you kind of based on where you are and but the key for me is that I always would keep my kids as the center of the
Right.
conversation and not worry so much about how I was feeling in the moment or what I might be reacting to and really always try to react in a way that role modeled for them the messaging that I wanted them to hear about adoption, which was that adoption was not something they needed to not share. It was not something they needed to be embarrassed about. It was not something I felt uncomfortable sharing or talking about.
Mm,
So that I always leaned in towards trying to answer transparently and honestly while setting boundaries around how much am I going to really get into this conversation with, random
right.
person at the store that I don't know and will never see again. So
Exactly.
that was, that's sort of how I approach it.
I wanted to ask you about what was important to you um, about like that they got growing up, being that they were Ethiopian. What was important in terms of culture for you?
So I think for me, what was most important is that they had a level of comfort and understanding of where they're from and of who they are, right? And like they can
Right.
take that and run with it in whatever direction, works for them now that they're adults. My kids are now 21, so they're adults. But I think that for me, I wanted them to be grounded in who they are, where they're from. So we did take them back to Ethiopia when they were maybe in middle schoolish. We
Okay.
went back and we did like a lot of extensive, we visited birth family, we,
Mm,
like traveled the country. We were very intentional about doing both parts of the culture, like a lot of the where you came from and some of the places that had more socioeconomic struggles and those things, but also we took them to places that were super luxurious. And like we wanted them to leave the country with a global sense of the country and all the various aspects of it. So I think for me, as far as culture, I wanted them to have a comfort level with where they were from and a comfort level interacting with people that are also where they're from, but being able to be honest and open about what they know and what they don't know, right? So my kids,
Mm.
both of them, one in high school, one in college, they've made friends along the way that have parents that are from Ethiopia. So their friends are from Ethiopia. They have parents that are from Ethiopia.
Oh,
And they've been
wow.
really transparent about sharing, they don't speak the language or they don't, whatever they feel like sharing because they're
Yeah.
very transparent about sharing that they were adopted and that their parents are not Ethiopian and sharing some of the cultural context. So I think just a comfort level with like moving through the world in your skin is super important. And moving through the world in your identity because as a transcultural or transracial adoptee or as an adoptee in general, your identity is going to be different from kids that or other people that have grown up with their biological families, right? Because you're putting together different cultures and different experiences into your story. So I think a
Right.
comfort level with that is what I was hoping for my kids.
Is that so before they went, like they've known since they were babies or very little
Yes.
that they were adopted and that they were and where they were adopted from?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
That was always a thing. So we always had art from Ethiopia or like things from Ethiopia in the house and we would talk about it. We had pictures of when we picked them up and like throughout we've always shared with them very proactively on an ongoing basis what their adoption story was.
Okay. Did you know any Ethiopian people like in the community or find like when they were as they were growing up?
We knew a couple of people from our church that were Ethiopian.
Okay.
And then we had friends who had also adopted from Ethiopia. So they themselves were not Ethiopian, but they had an Ethiopian child.
Okay. 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 All right. So keeping an eye on the time. Where is it gone? This should have been 6:30 to
Uh,
8 instead of 6:30 to 7:30 because I want to get to the Q&A. Two questions have come in and we had four that were submitted prior. I do want to let either of you jump in with tips. These have been so helpful along the way. You've actually been sharing tips along the way that I've been like Bev, you've been saying things like the modeling stuff that's been so good for parents to hear and so good for kids to hear if anybody is listening or watching with their children right now. And then Chris, you had some good things in terms of the love. I know one of the things that Chris you had also mentioned was that a piece that stood out for you from the NPR thing was that like they'd asked the mom of the daughter Mia what she sees as her role now, and that you found it interesting that her response focused on support and listening, which are important, you said, but didn't mention any concrete, specific ways, specific sort of actions to build her cultural competence. That's something I talk about a lot. If anybody knows me at Siena, I'm like, cultural competence is so key because depending on the race and all of that, like what your culture matters. So I'm going to stop. And Chris, let you share a bit.
Um, so how do I want to start? I had a way I wanted to start, but so in terms of
But however you want to start with what people should be thinking about or whatever you were thinking. Don't
yeah,
let me
and
know.
all right, all right. In terms of what people should be thinking about, big thing is understanding like if you're going to adopt a child, especially if you're a white person adopting a child of color, um, doing your best to understand what you can, and I know the process is complex. Um, but if you have your eyes on something on a child, like say you want to adopt a black child, um, making sure that beforehand you're doing your due diligence to
What's that look like?
build on your cultural competence. So, if you're adopting a child from Haiti, if you have the means and you're able to do it, go and travel there and see the people, meet the people, eat the food. If you don't have the means to do that, totally understandable, but making sure that you're doing your due diligence on whatever resources you can from your
Yeah.
home that you're doing your research and you're finding out about cultural things. And it's not just a Google search. You're trying to go down and you're trying to find people close to your community, within your community that you can actually go and talk to.
Mm.
But learning as much as you can. If there is a specific country or area that you're looking at.
Okay.
Um, Beyond that, I would say once you have adopted a child, making sure that you're really exposing them to as much as you can. If you're in an area that is very rural and you're not near a city, making sure you get into a city, making sure that if you have them again, not everybody has the means to,
Right.
and the adoption process can be expensive. So maybe after adopting, you can't do things right away. But having a goal of exposing your child to different foods, different music, um, movies, books, making sure that within the household there's representation, that that child can see themselves once they get to that point where they
Mm.
can see themselves,
Yeah.
that they can see themselves somewhere around the house. Um, it's a small, small, small example, uh, but it is so impactful. On our Christmas tree, growing up, one of them, sorry again, Mom. Uh, there is a little angel, and
Hmm.
it is a black angel. It's like handmade. It's very, very creepy. But there was represent that was one of my first, and I now have it on my tree. It was one of my
Hmm.
first ornaments, right? And uh from there on, you grow up. I have a my mother would always give an ornament to us every Christmas, and one of them, I probably got it when I was 5, was a black Santa Claus kicking a soccer ball because I love soccer. I
Okay.
grew up playing soccer, so boom, I see myself in that. I now have that on my tree. Like these are little things you can do around the house. My wife is a little jealous, I might say, because now everything is like Black Santa-esque around the house.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's making sure there's representation around the house.
Okay.
Um and uh getting more of a global sense. And I would say as I got older, that was one of the things that my parents did really, really or a pretty decent job of was within our means trying to get us to travel
Okay.
or bringing kind of culture to us. So we did the Fresh Air program
Oh,
where students from the inner city, you take on 1 or 2 kids for the inner city
okay. Oh.
for like 2 months out of the summer. It ended up being one of the kids, Hassan. After that, he and I bonded, and uh, and this was very young. That was also one of the first times like really seeing Black culture, but at that point wasn't really seeing it as that. It was
Hmm.
just a friend.
Hmm.
There's another friend,
Okay.
and oh, he looks like me. But
Okay.
we took him on every summer for like 5, 6 summers.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, awesome.
my sister was in the Peace Corps in Africa. She was there for like almost 3 years, and my freshman year in college, I had the opportunity. We went and visited her for 3.5 weeks. Um, she's working at a school, basically a concrete building that looks like it's been bombed. Hasn't been, just falling apart. All
Yeah.
concrete. She has an apartment where she could wake up and there might be a scorpion in her bathtub.
Mm.
Working with, very little resources, we got to go and experience this. We got to go to take a 12-hour horse ride, horse trek up these mountains, down these mountains, up these mountains until we found a village that we were headed to, apparently, that our guides were taking us to, of in the middle of the only way you can get there is horseback. And then we
Mm.
stayed there that night. The children of the village, it's like out of Discovery Channel. Like they would pulled out these instruments that they made out of the land, basically. And I'm like,
Okay.
that's not gonna produce anything. played some of the most beautiful music you could ever imagine. And then we slept in these thatch huts in the dirt, and I was terrified that thatch spiders were going to be dropping down on me.
Right.
And so
It's exposure.
experiencing traveling, but not just traveling, you can travel anywhere and have a great time. But if you're not going into the dirt of it and sleeping in
Yeah.
the dirt and having those experiences, those real experiences, if anything had happened to us, it would have been 2 days before a vehicle or a helicopter got out to us to airlift us out. Like,
Okay. So that's what you're talking about, like this firsthand, this experience. It's reminding me, I had a colleague somewhere that I worked before who had a friend of hers that she knew at it somewhere else, knew of a parent who had transracially adopted, and when it was a white parent, and whenever the black son would some issue would come up, her response would always just be to go to a museum. Well, I got to take him to a museum, and so and if, at some point, it seems like the message he's going to get is that my culture is something to look at, to look at from a museum, and I'm like, it's important to know present day people and immerse yourself. So he isn't also, because maybe her connection to Black culture was through a museum, but he is Black culture. So like you got to have this first person hands on. I'm going to read this one question for either of you to take. There is a tricky balance between acknowledging that adoption isn't ideal. If first family separation can be avoided, it's easier for children. If children can be placed within birth, family, or community, many things are better, easier for them. And the reality that adoption is real and that those kids and their adopted families simply need to be embraced as kids and families. Okay. How much do you recommend that parents are straightforward about that complicated reality, not only with critical others, but with their kids in developmentally appropriate ways? That was a mouthful, Bev, or whoever.
is that asking
It sounds
like
like,
when they should let kids know that they've been adopted?
I think so. Or like how much you want to share the stuff and like be
Well,
straightforward.
and maybe like I think the at least what I'm hearing is how much do you want to let kids know that adoption doesn't begin because of good things, right? Like that there's a
Mhm.
complicated relationship with adoption being positive. Yes, we are a family and we love each other, but adoption comes from loss and it comes from grief and it comes from if the world were working the way that it should and everybody had equal opportunity and everything was wonderful, adoption wouldn't exist, right? Like adoption
Right.
exists to solve a problem. So I think like how I at least what I'm hearing them asking is like how transparent are you with your kids about that? I think you're very transparent, but I think in which you're going to notice is a theme of my life, right? I believe in transparency. But I think you do it in age appropriate ways. So for me, one of the big things was we had that conversation first with our kids before they started kindergarten. And it was
Okay.
because I knew they were going to be going into public spaces where I would no longer be the one that was always with them. My ears would not always be with them to hear what people were saying around them. And typically, those are the spaces where people start, like, there are negative things that get said about adoption all the time. So, the kindergarten version of the conversation that we had is we know how our family came together. You know what adoption means. We've talked about why in a child-friendly way, why you were placed for adoption, why your mom made an adoption plan for you. Um, and we know that this is the way that our family was supposed to be, but there are people out there that don't think that adoption is good. Everybody doesn't always think that adoption is a good thing. And you have to be prepared that if people ask you questions or they say things to you that are negative about adoption, that you feel like you could come talk to me and you can ask me questions, right? Now, my kids are being raised by an adoption social worker. So they will tell you now that they're 21 that there was a lot of over talking and overthinking that happened in our house on a regular basis, right?
Right,
But I
right.
do think that it's important to prep kids because they hear things and when they hear things that are hurtful outside of your presence, often they don't come back and say anything to you if you haven't prepared them that it might happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that developmentally you share that story, and as they get older, you share the complexity more and more as they're interested. Like I have one kid who I could talk to this about now as an adult and she would be interested, and one that would like tune me out and like move on, right? Because it's not her thing. It doesn't bother
Okay.
her. She doesn't care what other people think. It's all good for her. So I think that
Right.
you share developmentally and progressively as they get older, as they're interested and invested in it. But I do think it's a concept that you have to share because it's very real. And if you Google adoption, right? Like a
Yeah.
host of negative things comes up along with some of the resources and some of the positives. And kids have
Mm.
access to the internet in their pocket now, very all the time. So you have
Good
to,
point.
yeah, you have to prepare them that when they Google adoption, it's not going to be all roses and the stories that we may be telling them as parents at home.
Okay. Okay. Sounds like what when I arm my kids for being in, like, if you're a black kid, you're going to independent schools, there's some things I got to tell you to know if you're going to be in these spaces to expect.
Yeah.
Can I say one? I know we're pressed on time,
No, let
but
me just say this. Oh,
yeah.
so we are at time. And but I am going to keep going for just a few minutes if it's okay with the panelists. And I just want to, in case you want to hang around, we're gonna get Chris's response to that. I just want to read you the other two questions that will be answered in case you want to hang around for those. So one question that had come in was, we adopted our son when he was less than 1 month old. He's now an 8-year old. What can we expect in his teen years? So that's one question. Another one is, how should this, and by this is just transracial adoption, I guess, in general, because that was from the fire. How should this lens inform discipline, both at school and at home? Um, and then there was another sort of personal question I wonder about Chris's mom. What do you think her motivation was in wanting a child of color? So I don't know if we'll have time to get to that, but those are ones that, if you want to hang around, that's what we're going to answer, and then they can, both of you can give tips to educators. If you don't want to hang around, thank you so much for your time. I will keep the recording going so that when you get it, you can get the answers to these last few questions if you can't hang around. Um, but if you do have to leave, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here on a Tuesday evening. And I wish you a wonderful evening and a happy holiday season. All right. So Chris, yes, what do you want to add?
No, I just want to say I do think it is very important. I have multiple friends, one I'm thinking about in particular, who's also adopted. He's not racially adopted. However, when he found out, he was probably 10, give or take, between 8 and 10. And
Mm,
he ran away from home, went down the street, stayed at a friend's house. The parents called and said, he's here, he's good, he's all right. But I see that as if you wait too long to have that
mm,
conversation, to have the conversation of you are adopted and here's why. Like you've been given, not given, but you have an opportunity here. It's not that your parent didn't love you. It's not your parent didn't want you. They did because you are here and they are giving you an opportunity. You have an opportunity in life. But also the social piece as for that kid, you get to a certain age, you're going to hear in the classroom, in the hallways, in the locker room, wherever it might be, a comment about oh, it might not be directed to you, but it might be students or kids saying something to another student. You should have been adopted, or
Mhm.
you know you're adopted, or I will
yeah.
say, my sister, uh, you're gonna get sent back. Um,
Oh, ouch. So kids be mean when they're in the
so, and
adolescence.
if he
Yeah.
didn't know before
Mhm.
he heard those comments, right, that he is adopted, and then he goes home, and days pass, months pass, whatever, and the time that comes about that his
Yeah.
parents have the conversation and let him know he's adopted, that child might have heard a bunch of negative things about adoption.
Mhm.
And so now that is why he ran. That is why he was devastated. Um, I love his parents. I think his parents did a great job raising him. Uh, everybody's gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna make mistakes with my daughter. Like that might have been a drop ball. I do think my parents did a good job of bridging that gap of at a baby newborn stage
Yeah.
saying that message. We love you. You're adopted. You have opportunity. It's not that your birth parents did not love you. Using terms like that, consistently,
Yeah.
it goes a very long way.
Okay. Okay. Can somebody address the one about what can they expect in his teen years? I don't know if that's hard to.
Then to be a teenager, then to complain. No, I do think in teen there is there or not there is boy, a lot goes on with a teenager, and I can't. I'm now 40, so I can't necessarily say it's the same as when I was a teenager. But working in independent school, there is going to be uh some fight back.
Right.
Why didn't you let me know this? Why didn't you expose me to this? And potentially some of that trying to figure out what it means to be black. If there is, uh, again, if you're in a majority of a white area, you're eventually, there's a good chance you're, as you get older, you're going to be like, oh, wait, I want to kind of see what this side is like. So a lot of experimentation. I don't know exactly what my mother would say about my teen years, but I would know like I went through the gangster stage. I went through the do I went through the stage of, but it was because of style, right? And trying to figure out what it meant to be black.
Yeah.
I look at it now, and now I'm having the conversation here at my school with the administration. So and so is wearing a head wrap. So and so is wearing a do rag. I'm like, yeah, they just got their hair braided, and it's raining outside. It's not a gangster thing. It's not a hood thing. They are trying to protect their hair.
Good, no, good thing that you're there, right?
Yeah,
This is why you need a diverse staff so they can be like, well, let me speak on behalf of that. And good thing you had those experiences so you could say, actually, this is because,
right.
you know.
Right, right.
Bev, did you want to add anything to the teen thing or
I would say this. I would challenge the parent that asked that question by saying to them, you still have time to impact how
Mhm.
your child shows up as a teen. And
because he's
because
eight,
you're
right? Yeah,
asking
he's
the
eight now.
question at the
Eight.
right age and at the right time, a lot of how your kid shows up is going to be, well, of course, there's personality and there's just teenagers or teenagers, right? But you have a lot of it is also based on what you do now in the present. And I think that a couple of things I think that people should really lean in on embracing. It should not be your child's responsibility to find role models that look like them. So this is your opportunity and your time for you to do the work to make the relationships, have adult friendships, find friends, find people to be part of your village and your community that look like your child so that when they get to the teen years and they're facing things that they don't feel comfortable coming to you about because culturally you can't connect on it, you've already built somebody into your village and into your family and into your world that is your trusted person, right? For your
Right.
kids to, your child to be able to go to. I think that is super important. I also think that, when we talk about kids exploring their culture or learning things about their culture, like it's not a child's job to have to it's not their job to find things and find ways to learn things. They shouldn't have to figure out their culture. Like it's your job to do it. So this is your opportunity to again lean in again with that village and not just to form the relationships for your kids, but for you to start learning what are the things that are important to Black teens, right? Like learn it now while your kid is 8 so that you can set yourself up and you can be in a community and you can figure out what those resources are that you need so that your kid doesn't have to figure out things on their own, right? They don't have to learn how to use a do-rag on their own because you would have already bought them a do-rag because that's what Black parents would do. We would buy our kids their do-rag because we also are invested in the very expensive hair that we just paid to have braided, right? So I think learn those things now. Lean in on being uncomfortable. Lean in on being in spaces where you have to learn things that are different. because that's what you're essentially asking your kid to do every day. So like
Mm.
we really are challenging our parents at this stage when your kids are young to lean in on putting yourself into those situations as well, so that then by the time they get to be teenagers, whatever they need based on their individual personality, you'll already have the resources and you'll already have the capacity built into your family and your support system. And the last thing I would say is don't be in white only spaces. Like, I think there was a time where I would give families advice about how to navigate white only spaces. But if you are connected to Siena, or assuming you live in the DMV, if you are in white only spaces, that's a choice that you're making. And it's not the right choice to make if you're choosing to raise a kid of color. So I don't give people advice on how to make it work. I give them advice on things just not to do. Don't do it. It's not good for your kids and it's not necessary. There are lots of, and even as you're leaning into being in diverse spaces, pick your spaces broadly, right? Like they're not every black space, if you're talking about raising a black child, has to be a place that has socioeconomic struggle. Like expose your kids to the full range of like black people of different types and places of different types. You know, there are churches, there are stores, there's you could just simply go grocery shopping in PG County. Like there's so many things that you can do, right? So lean in on doing the things that make your kids comfortable and lean away from doing the things that make them uncomfortable. That's my advice.
Thanks, Bev. You know, some of that reminds me of the old colleague who had the friend who had the parent that would go to the museum. Something happened at school. There was a question. Somebody wanted to know something about civil rights, or as a kid had a question, or something happened. Different examples where it would be going to the museum. And when the friend was telling me a couple of times examples of that, I thought to myself, what would I do? You know, what did my parents do if the similar thing happened in my house? What would I do? And I know it's not the same thing, but I thought going to the museum would never have been a thought. So I hear what you're saying, right? Do a lot of this work now, find ways to build in these people so
It's the
that
people. The biggest strength you have is finding human resources, right? Like literal resources. And you have to be open to making friends outside of your regular circles. You have to be open to finding the people that are invested in connecting and finding the people that are invested in your kid. And those people exist. It just is that you have to put yourself into situations and new environments to find them. And you have to be vulnerable, right? You have to just say it out loud. Like say the quiet part out loud. I am looking for people to help support
right.
my kid. I'm looking to build a village. And I think you'll be surprised at how many people will actually step forward. But you have to put yourself proactively into those spaces, because if you don't, ultimately your kid is going to have to learn how to do it on their own. And it's so much harder for them because they're kids and you're the adult that has made the decision. It's your responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. I kept thinking about them seeing themselves as artifacts, right? Like this is how I learned about me. Like, so and to not put it on them. Okay, lens of discipline. I don't know if if that question has enough to be able to answer, but how should this lens inform discipline both at home and at school?
I think that
That depends on the family. I feel like
that
discipline is so
depends.
different.
I think the way I kind of look at that, it depends on, or not depends on. It's looking at the real situation as a parent. What happened? Why? Like, so if they're talking about school discipline, looking at the whole situation, looking at the big picture, looking and making sure that you are not just hearing from the teacher saying your child did this, X, Y, and Z. There might be more to it.
Mhm.
There might,
Mhm.
so be willing to dig in if we're talking school discipline. Because there might be some stuff, because if you sit there and say, no, 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 your teacher said this, X, Y, and Z, and the teacher might be white, might be a white student, black student, and there might be things missed. There might be things missed. So be willing to push back a little bit rather than just I'm all for, hey, you're the teacher, you're dealing with my kid all day. I trust you. I trust you. But when it comes to certain situations, if it comes to certain social or even racial situations, make sure that you're willing to dig in and ask some tough questions of the adults that are overseeing your children. So you can really get to the bottom of things, because one of the worst things you can do, in my eyes, is fully side with the teacher or fully side with the school and come to find out 10, 15 years later, damn, this
Mm,
is what was happening to my kid. This is what was going on. I trusted the teachers too much. I trusted that administration, that school too much.
good.
Because there was more that was going on to my kid at that school. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
one of the other questions that I am going to choose to not do, because I feel like you've done it. It was also how did your racial concept evolve within a familiar structure that did not racially resemble you? I think that was a question for you, Chris, but I think you've done a good job of answering that in the time that we've had. But I do want to get us out of here on both of you kind of sharing should educators know, kind of on that note of thinking about school, like what should educators know? One of the things I think working in a school, especially these independent schools, is sometimes like a black student with white parents versus a black student with black parents, or an Asian student with white parents versus the Asian student with Asian parents. Like there's differences. Um, I don't know. I feel like there's just some things to think about with different kinds of family makeups and expectations or stereotypes. I don't know. But is there anything that either of you can share that educators should consider or think about?
things are gonna happen. The kid's gonna come home and feel discriminated against or singled out, um, for right reasons, wrong reasons, uh, and to be able to have that conversation openly and supportively. Um, I just think of situations of knowing kids finding out that I'm adopted by white parents, black kids, as I went through schooling, oh, you're not really black. You got white parents, you live in New Hampshire.
Mm,
Um, White kids saying you're not really black, you got white parents living in New Hampshire. But then the expectation is you're good at sports, right? You're black.
mm,
Um,
hmm.
Thankfully, I was good at sports. I would say for me, that was one of the huge navigators through everything, was because I could always lean on sports. And that
Yeah,
was where my leadership really came through. And uh, some kids didn't have that. And I watched it. I watched some of these, whether they're adopted or not, the black kids just get pushed down, pushed down, pushed down because uh, they didn't fit the typical mold in
right.
the black community or the white community. And yeah, for me, sports, and that's actually the thing. Making sure that your kid finds the thing that keeps them grounded. So giving them a variety that they can choose from as they're growing up.
Okay.
But really supporting the thing that makes them feel most grounded. If I did not have sports, I wasn't going to get praised in the classroom, especially early on. I wasn't going to find the praise there. I wasn't going to find the praise inside, but because I was an athlete, um, I was able to sneakily be in that popular, I don't want to say popular, but the negativity that did happen,
Hmm.
I got so much praise for how I performed on the athletic front
Okay.
that after somebody said something that was insensitive, that might have hurt, shoot, I got 100 people over here cheering me on at this game.
Okay.
So that
Mm,
person doesn't mean anything to me.
yeah.
Um, Now
Finding
I'm
things.
40 and everything hurts, and now I don't know what to do.
Different story, a bit of a different story there.
Um,
Beverly, you have things that like, what's our educator's role or
So I think for educators, I would say there's a few things, right? One, to recognize that adoption is complex. So that and you're not expected to know everything. Like there's a lot of pressures on educators to manage a lot, right? And I think so give yourself permission to ask questions. Give yourself permission to seek resources. If you have a child in your class or in your school or that you're working with that you know is adopted, whether it be transracial or not. Like, you have to have an extra air of sensitivity because everything from assignments about family trees all the way through to
Mm,
race of your parents or cultural expectations or bring a baby picture to school, all of those things can be triggering to kids. So you have to remember that adoption is complex. You're not always going to get it right, but you need to have an ear to the ground for knowing when to pause and ask questions to see if maybe you have hit on a sore spot or you have misspoken or the child needs an alternative path, right? And I think the not being afraid to ask for help, ask the parents. Like, sometimes the parents will, if parents don't feel like they have the answers, they may have connections to agencies, right? Like at Barker, we do school talks all the time where we'll go into schools and we'll have conversations with students about adoption. Sometimes it helps the kids by having somebody else put voice to what it is. It helps make it a safer space for the child. So feel free to bring in external resources. Feel free to ask for help. And when it comes to transracial adoption in particular, I think it comes sort of what Chris was saying with acknowledging race. It's not just about adoption. Like, recognize that unconscious bias is real and it's in all of us. And it's better to acknowledge that and to be open about that and to be attentive to it and aware of it than it is to pretend that it doesn't exist.
mm.
So when you're engaged in disciplining kids or you're engaged in you may not even know the things that are being triggered for you. So make it your business to stay aware that unconscious bias is real and that
Real.
and the way to address it is not to pretend that it's not real. It's to lean in and figure out what yours might be and make sure that you're treating kids the way that they deserve to be treated.
Those are great pointers, tips to go out on. Thank you both so much. You are rock stars. I appreciate you. We've had people who um, stayed on and are still here. So I can tell this was an important conversation, a meaningful conversation. If there's ever time for a part two, I hope that I can reach out to you both. And if maybe people will give more questions. I see Chris,
I
that
threw my
you,
I just realized it just went to the host
all
and
right, do,
the panelists.
can
If
you
you
give,
want to share my email for people to ask questions, whatever, reach out, more than welcome.
all right, I will do it now to go to
You could
everyone
share
that's
mine
left
too. Do you have
here.
mine, Samantha?
Yeah,
If anybody has questions, we have lots of local groups and things that we offer. So if anybody ever has questions about adoption in general, or you're looking for consults for your kids, or we have therapy services, you can always reach out and I can refer you.
all right. So awesome. I'll give you a minute, friends who are still on, to copy those. CH Brown at brewsteracademy.org for Chris, and B. Clarke at barkerfoundation.org for Beverly. Yes, his name is Chris Brown, and that was a hilarity piece upon meeting him. That's a whole other story.
Oh,
um, and
know.
but yeah, thanks. This has been great. This has been super helpful. I will, if I get more questions or anything, I'll definitely reach out to you. Everybody who has hung out with us, thank you so much for your time again. I wish that you all would have a good night, and I'm going to say good night to you too, Chris and Beverly. You all have a good night. Thank you
thank you
so
guys.
Really
Have a
much.
nice.
great evening.
Really
Thank
nice
you all
being with
for
you guys tonight.
awesome.